Try it again. First mistake. Welcome to the Scottsdale Planning Commission public hearing. The city encourages your interest and participation in the public hearing process. The Planning Commission is an advisory board to the City Council on land use and zoning matters. The meeting agenda items are development applications that require public hearings. The Planning Commission considers the requests and makes a recommendation for approval or denial to the City Council. The City Council makes the final decision for or against approval of the application. The agenda consists of the roll call, minutes approval of the prior meeting, continuances are for any items that will not be heard tonight. Withdrawals are for items that have been withdrawn from further consideration. Consent agenda is for items not likely to require a presentation or discussion. All items on the consent agenda may be voted on together. Any commissioner may move any item from the consent agenda to the regular agenda. Regular agenda is where each item includes a presentation and a recommendation by staff, a presentation by the applicant, and public testimony. After, the applicant will have the opportunity to respond to the public testimony. The Planning Commission then discusses the case and votes. Non-action is for items for discussion. No vote will be made by the Planning Commission. We have comment cards. Yellow is for written comment cards. Blue is for those who want to speak on an item. Citizens wishing to speak on any agenda item may fill out a blue speaker card, or if not willing to speak, may fill out a yellow comment card and turn it into the staff table before the agenda item is to be discussed. The chair will call you by name when it is your turn to speak. When called, come to the podium, state your name and address, and then begin speaking. Groups wishing to speak should elect a spokesperson to represent the views of the group. To facilitate the meeting, your comment will be limited to 3 minutes for individual speakers, 1 additional minute for each additional individual present at the meeting who has contributed their time to our representative speaker, up to 10 minutes. Please format your speech to be accommodated within the applicable time frame given. For convenience in timing presentations, a light system is installed on the podium. The light will be green for 2 minutes and yellow for 1 minute. Please conclude your comments when the red light appears. Thank you for your interest and time. Now we will begin the meeting with the roll call.
Chair Higgs.
Present. Not really. I'm on the call.
Vice Chair Young is absent. Commissioner Gonzalez.
Present.
Commissioner Kaminsky.
Here.
Commissioner Ertel.
Here.
Commissioner Scarborough.
Here.
Commissioner Serena.
Here.
Thank you.
Is there any public comment? I don't believe there's any public comment that is unagendized. So let's go for the administrative report.
Thank you, Commissioner Ertel. Members of the Planning Commission, I want to thank Commissioner Ertel for taking over MC duties tonight with the chair being remote. So thank you for taking that over. Just want to let you know in terms of an update, since we originally sent the link to the agenda regarding the regular meeting minutes, it was brought to our attention that there was a redundant sentence in the minutes, and that had since been removed for a couple of days now. So in case you noticed that, that was removed. And then last item, just quickly, our next meeting will be October 11th. And so I just wanted to make sure that you're aware that we do plan on having a meeting on October 11th. Thank you.
Very good, thank you. Well, that being presented, I will go ahead and ask for approval of the regular meeting minutes from September 13th.
I move that we approve the minutes from September 13th.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Can we call the roll?
Chair Higgs.
Yes.
Commissioner Gonzalez.
Yes.
Commissioner Kaminsky.
Yes.
Commissioner Ertel.
Yes.
Commissioner Scarborough.
Yes.
Commissioner Serena.
Yes.
Motion passes. Thank you.
Let's turn that on again. Moving on to action items. Regular agenda 13 ZN 2022, the park. Mr. Clough, will you make your presentation?
Thank you. Good evening, Commissioner Ertel, Planning Commissioners, and Chair Higgs remotely. I'm Brian Clough with the city's current planning department. I'm going to give you an overview of the proposed development for the park. It's case 13ZN 2022. So specifically, the request this evening is from the applicant for a recommendation to the City Council regarding a zoning district map amendment. That would be to change the zoning from general commercial C4 to our planned Air Park Core Development District with the Air Park Mixed Use Residential subcategory and also with the planned shared development overlay on top of that. That also includes a development plan for the proposed development with bonus development standards for building height and floor area ratio. And that's all to allow a mixed use development with 1,236 dwelling units, 223 hotel rooms, and approximately 250,000 square feet of commercial floor area. The site we're looking at this evening is the old Cracker Jack site located on Scottsdale Road, a bit south of Frank Lloyd Wright. You can see the site highlighted in yellow here. And a closer look at the site, it does stretch all the way from Scottsdale Road to Dial Boulevard or the 73rd Street alignment, and from Paradise Lane to Tierra Buena. It was developed with the Cracker Jacks about 30 years ago, and it's been vacant, not in operation for, I believe, a couple years now, so the developer is looking to redevelop this with mixed use. The existing general plan designation per the General Plan 2035 is mixed use neighborhoods. And then the site location relative to the greater Air Park character area plan there in red. And with the land use map overlaid, identifying it within the Air Park mixed use residential subcategory of the Air Park character area plan land use map. The existing zoning on the site, general commercial C4, and then the proposed zoning, PCP, AMUR, PSD. To the north is the Promenade Shopping Center with the planned regional center district. To the east is Air Park area in our industrial park district, and then there's some commercial to the south. Across the street to the west is the city of Phoenix. This is a look at the conceptual site plan within the development plan. It proposes up to 12 buildings with over 2 million square feet of floor area in total. Building heights on the site range from single-story 30-foot tall buildings all the way up to 119 feet tall, about 10 stories. You can see several access points off of Scottsdale Road, Paradise Lane, all four sides of the development, and interior circulation for vehicles through the site. There will be public realm improvements, including new sidewalks around the entire perimeter. Those would be 8-foot wide detached sidewalks. Also internal on-street parking and pedestrian circulation through the development. Notably, there is a mouse doesn't look like it's working here, but central to the development, you can see an open space kind of park area there. That's an open space that's about 2 acres in size that will be centrally located within the project, and that will be open for public access. This is some cross sections through the site. These are both north-south cross sections to give you an idea of the massing for the development with the building heights varying, and this also overlays the inclined building step-back plane with the dashed line that shows how the PCP district regulates building massing as you're adjacent to street frontages. And then this, another slide with sections that are east-west sections, similarly showing massing in the as it relates to the multiple buildings throughout the development. And as I mentioned before, the tallest building right there in the center on the top is at 119 feet. This is a look at the pedestrian circulation plan, just to emphasize some of the pedestrian improvements that will be going in with the project. The yellow dash line around the perimeter indicates new 8-foot wide detached sidewalks around the entire development. And then you can see all the internal pedestrian circulation, those sidewalks ranging in width from 8 feet wide to 6 feet wide. There's also landscaping around the perimeter with street trees along the sidewalks to provide shade for the pedestrian. One component of the request I mentioned is the Planned Shared Development District. So the purpose of the PSD is an overlay on the property that allows future subdivision of parcels within the development. And from a zoning perspective, it allows the city to still look at the overall development as a whole with regard to development standards. So this is a conceptual subdivision plan that's within the development plan that gives you an idea of how it might parcel out in the future, along with a land use table and makeup of how the standards would be distributed through the property. And the PSD allows that to occur, transferring development rights, and we continue to look at the development as a whole. Also, as part of the request are bonus development standards, both for floor area ratio and building height. With the request, the base FAR for the PCP district is 0.8. The applicant is using bonuses to get up to 1.73, which equates to about 1.12 million square feet of bonus floor area. The building height base is 84 feet. The applicant's requesting to use bonuses to get up to 119 feet. The PCP district allows up to 134 feet of height. They're proposing 119 with bonuses. That's 35 feet of bonus height. The zoning ordinance has calculations for how these bonuses equate to a value for a special improvement. For these bonuses, that value is about $15.8 million. That through development agreement is currently considered to be distributed to the Air Park Area Trust Fund for special improvements in the area as an in lieu fee. So that would be a payment to the city for use on special improvements, public improvements within the Air Park area. And with development, especially with projects of this scale, there's always a lot of consideration of impacts of the development and mitigation of those impacts. And usually with the development, there's also some benefits that come along with it too. So I just wanted to highlight some of the public realm improvements that would be going in with the development, including a new traffic signal at Tierra Buena and Scottsdale Road. I already mentioned 8-foot sidewalks around the entire development, including enhanced open space nodes at the corners and landscape buffers, a new bus shelter on Scottsdale Road, new street lights along all the street frontages with the exception of Scottsdale Road, open space and landscaping improvements that are accessible to the public, and also an enhanced pedestrian crossing at a mid-block location on Paradise Lane going north into the Promenade Shopping Center. That will be signalized with a hybrid beacon. Also, a few items to note that are within the development agreement, so not necessarily being presented this evening, but to the purview of the City Council being considered moving forward are possible power line undergrounding along Scottsdale Road, water conservation measures that would help mitigate water use for the project, and workforce housing units that would be a minimum of 10% of the total unit count. This did go before our Airport Advisory Commission in June 21st of 2023. It was approved, recommended approval with a 5-0 vote. There were stipulations associated with that recommendation, including a finding of no hazard from the FAA on height analysis, as well as no flashing lights, the beacons that sometimes you'll see on taller buildings near airports. So the applicant has already received that finding of no hazard from the FAA, and it also did not require the use of flashing lights on the building, so those have been satisfied. And in conclusion, a summary here of the action requested this evening for the recommendation to City Council regarding the zoning district map amendment. And that concludes staff's presentation. I'm happy to answer any questions you may have for staff, and the applicant team is also here with the presentation.
We have a question down there from Mr. Gonzalez, Commissioner Gonzalez.
Thank you, Chair. I guess my question is, and question I guess would be on a lot of people's mind is, the development funds that are being paid out of excess of $15 million, how is that being spent? Does the city look at that and has the expenditure in mind, or does it has to be contained within the airport envelope, or how does that work?
Sure, Commissioner Gonzalez. At this point, those funds are being allocated as an in lieu payment to the city. So that would go into an account for the city to use on future improvements within the boundaries of the airport character area. And at this point, I mentioned a couple things that are being considered within the development agreement, but it would just be an in lieu payment and not a specific improvement proposed at this time. It'd be for future use.
So that's not for improvements to the property, like as if we had to bring in different sizing on sewer or water lines or anything like that. It's not meant for utilities or anything like that to service the project. It's actually something that's banked by the city, and the city can use it at its discretion.
Correct, Commissioner Gonzalez and planning commissioners. It would not be used for anything associated with this development. The developer is required to provide all the infrastructure improvements needed to serve their own development, including upsizing of water and sewer and any other associated infrastructure. So these would be for city use for public improvements outside of this development.
Thank you, sir.
Commissioner Kaminsky.
Thank you. I had a couple of questions. You mentioned in the DA that there would be consideration of undergrounding of power lines. What exactly does consideration mean?
Yes, Commissioner Kaminsky and planning commissioners, the consideration means that there is a provision currently in the draft form of the development agreement that references power lines along Scottsdale Road that allows the city the option to require undergrounding of those power lines associated with the development. If that were to occur, that would come out of those bonus funds.
Okay,
But at this point, it's an option, it's not a requirement,
okay,
and that'd be at the city's discretion.
thank you. I had a couple more questions. Could you, there was a drawing that showed kind of a tan color, light tan and dark tan for the building planes. I was wondering if the parking is subterranean or if that was reflective of a wrapped podium with structure above. Is the light tan like wrapped uses, or where is the parking other than the one garage?
Planning commissioners and Commissioner Kaminsky, the majority of the parking is provided within parking structures. There's one building, this building right here is a standalone parking structure. All of the other buildings, the more substantial buildings that you see, will have parking integrated into the building, both subgrade and above grade, subject to Development Review Board approval. The applicant might be able to provide additional information if they know specifics per building. So, for example, each of the residential buildings would be self-parking within the building for their tenants. And then you can also see surface parking along the streets through the development.
So the darker tan is the elevation, is building above the first floor, and the light tan is ground level? Is that?
I believe it's illustrating variation in planes there, but
Okay.
I can't confirm that the lighter color is ground level or not.
And I did have a series of questions. Thank you for providing me some answers back. Did you also provide those to the applicant?
I did.
Okay, super. There was one that was related to a condition number 7. Is that something I should ask the applicant about? That was on page 19 of the report, with some additional wording to address the setbacks along the perimeter.
Commissioner Kaminsky and commissioners, if that's an item that you would like to bring up for discussion, I think it'd be appropriate to ask the question at this time, and maybe make any suggestions you may have, and then the applicant can respond to that.
Okay. So my concern is that in the establishment of the overlay district for the whole development, we're establishing setbacks without having the design finalized, and there's a lot of details in the design that we don't know yet. by establishing those setbacks, it may cause future design issues with underground utilities or infrastructure that we're not aware of, including possibly power lines being undergrounded. So I was wondering if this stipulation 7 could be worded to include with additional setback where needed to account for curb line relocations, utility easements, and deceleration lanes. So adding some recognition that until the design addresses the utilities, we may have to accommodate some additional setback along those frontages. So that was my request.
Thank you, Commissioner. And as I responded before, I think that's certainly something to consider and evaluate as part of this request, and I'd be interested to see the applicant's response.
Pardon me, so that your question will be followed up with the applicant. Any other questions from other commissioners? How about Commissioner Higgs, or Chair Higgs?
No, I'm all set, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Clough. Then we would like to hear from Mr. Berry. And by the way, it's showing 10 minutes, but we understand that you received an additional list of questions. So if you would shoot for 5 minutes over.
Chair Higgs remotely and Commissioner Ortel, members of the commission, before you start the clock, I want to answer Commissioner Kaminsky's question, but also I would respectfully request, are there any cards to speak, and if so, how many? Do
We have 2 cards.
Two cards to speak, so not a large volume of folks that wish to speak. I think it's important that you understand that I've got children in college. No, I think it's important that you understand that this case is complex. There are not substantial other cases on your agenda, and with due respect, would appreciate the opportunity to convey perhaps some more information on a large, complex project for the benefit of the public and those that may be watching or wish to watch this in the future. If we could be closer to 20 without handcuffing us, that would be great.
Sure, no handcuffs. I mean, I was asked that you shoot for 15, but if it takes 20, it takes 20.
Okay, all right.
We do want the questions covered.
Thank you. So again, before we start the clock, if I could answer Commissioner Kaminsky's question, Chair Higgs, members of the commission. So we were able to better understand your question about the setbacks and the potential for utility corridors and all. And our analysis is that currently there'd be no utilities in any of those areas. So those would not impact the quality of the built environment and the landscaping along Scottsdale Road, for example. So the short answer is we're very much amenable to your suggestion on the changing the wording of the stipulation. The current requirement in the city ordinance is that setbacks are measured from back of curb. So if you have a decel lane or that type of thing, the building setback is automatically moved already. I think the one consideration, if there's a way to address, might be if we are required to underground those 69 kV lines that march down Scottsdale Road. There seems to be a lot of community interest in undergrounding those, maybe all the way from Thunderbird up to Frank Lloyd Wright. So the only unknown is what impact that would have by undergrounding those power lines. But we think we can make it work, even if we have to underground those power lines. So I'm told by our consultants that we can embrace the language that you've suggested on that stipulation.
That being the case, now is that something, Commissioner Kaminsky, that you would want to define in this meeting?
I would have the modifications read into the motion at the end.
Okay. Trust me, I'll forget. Be sure to remind me, okay? Thank you. All right, sir, if you would begin your 15 minutes, or 20, as the case may be.
We lawyers always add a 0 to our numbers. I'm just saying so. All right. Chair Higgs, members of the Commission, this will be a two-part presentation. You'll be grateful to know that I'm not going to be up here for that entire period. Actually, Jeff Brand, our architect and planner, will be up here for the majority of that time. This location is unique. So you can see Scottsdale Road, our site here. This Scottsdale Road location is truly unique. And Cracker Jack's in its time was unique. But the advent of newer recreational facilities, predominantly in the Salt River Pima Maricopa Indian community, resulted really in the death knell of Cracker Jack's, and they closed their doors. And we were all left with a lot of memories when it closed. But the city and the community was also left with a 32-acre abandoned piece of property on our namesake road. And after the Cracker Jack's closed, many of us and many in the community wondered, what is next for this property? What's the future of this property? And as oftentimes the case, the what depends on the who. Not the band, but the who. Who's going to buy this property? In this instance, the who is very good news because the owner is George Kurtz. Now, George Kurtz is a visionary in his industry who has transformed cybersecurity in the 11 years since he founded his company called CrowdStrike. And CrowdStrike is now a NASDAQ 100 tech company and again, an industry leader in cybersecurity globally. George is an area resident who moved here from California about 10 years ago. He does business and has exposure and worked in many of the cities, both small and large, around the world. And with that experience, George, when he moved to the area, literally fell in love with the area and with Scottsdale. And he is very, very optimistic about the future of Scottsdale. Now, he's been searching as a visionary. He's had a passion for trying to find a location where you could build a transformational, mixed-use innovation campus that merges technology, sustainability, access to venture capital. I want to stress that, access to venture capital, because that's an ingredient in this mix that Mr. Kurtz has a unique opportunity to bring to the table. And a place that would attract the best and the brightest knowledge workers from around the country to here in Scottsdale. Now, he could have gone anywhere, and he was courted in many places, particularly in the Valley, but he chose Scottsdale. A major reason he chose this site in Scottsdale is his commitment to the Scottsdale Air Park. Now, Mr. Kurtz owns 3 properties in the air park, or I should say 4 properties in the air park. One is on the runway with access to the runway. There are 2 parcels located over here off the runway but with access to the taxiway. He also owns, obviously, the park, and just last year, he bought the Scottsdale Promenade Shopping Center. Now, one of the things that George also believes in very strongly based on his travels and his work in the tech world is the importance of sustainability, and not just environmental sustainability, but other types of sustainability. But in this instance, I want to focus on the promenade. For example, he's walking the walk. When he bought the promenade less than a year ago, now this is a quote from the Scottsdale Independent from last month, and the city of Scottsdale was rightfully touting what they did for water conservation. And the article says, well, temperatures soared across the valley last month in July. Water use dropped in Scottsdale, saving 7% when compared to July of 2022. And that is something that this city should be extremely proud of, and the water department should be extremely proud of, and our citizens should be extremely proud of. By comparison, at the Scottsdale Promenade, in less than a year, compared to a year ago, July, water use at the promenade dropped 57%. And that's not because the stores were closed. In fact, they're doing very well there. That is because of George's commitment to technology. And in tech jargon, this becomes a beta test for the city to be able to talk to other owners of existing centers to say, look, if this guy can do it over here at this huge shopping center, you can do it too. Now, George's and the city's vision really aligns with this project. Here's an excerpt from the city's 2-year-old economic development 5-year strategic plan, which was approved unanimously by the city council. Now, this is from the goals and strategies. bolster Scottsdale's startup ecosystem, meaning tech startups, develop a remote worker campaign to draw tech-savvy and skilled talent to Scottsdale. Scottsdale's startup ecosystem is expanding, but it needs a champion. Now, this again is the city's 5-year economic development strategic plan unanimously approved by the council. Now, George can be that champion. He's uniquely situated to be that champion. And the park can be that catalyst to help achieve these important strategic goals. Chair Higgs, members of the commission, like to have Jeff Brand come up and talk about the details of the project. As you know, Jeff is an architect with Nelson Partners. He's a Southern Scottsdale resident. He helped design Kierland Commons. He designed the Scottsdale Quarter, which is just 1,200 feet south of this site. It's about the same size piece of property. And George sought out Jeff to help make his vision come true as well. So, thank you.
Thank you, John. Chair Higgs and Commissioners, again, I'll repeat, my name is Jeff Brand. I'm with Nelson Partners, 15210 North Scottsdale Road. Thanks, John, for the robust introduction and for leaving me more than 2 minutes, so appreciate that. I just wanted to start by maybe talking about the project that's, aside from just the uses and square footages and things that are outlined in the package that you guys received. But the client, by the way, he's making me do this on our overhead projection system here. So bear with my paperwork. You know, we were approached by the client, by Mr. Kurtz, to come up with something that was impactful for what we were doing here at the park, to listening to his vision, and his vision is reflective about making a real impact on the community. As we surveyed this and looked at what was going on, both directly adjacent to this property, south of here, Kierland, Scottsdale Quarter, north of here, other developments, what we realized what was really needed from a community standpoint was a really impactful open space, and that's what the heart of this project is. Keep in mind, we were working on this project in 2021, so we were all kind of coming out of the COVID pandemic, coming out of remote environments, and there was a lot of talk about the healing aspect of being able to occupy outdoor spaces, not only as a community, but as the workforce. So this is, again, this is the heart of the project, is taking something and taking an emotional response to what's needed and what would be special in this community, and having a plan that circulates 100% around that. So we'll go through this, and we'll, instead of kind of parsing through details of the plan, we just want to talk about maybe what's maybe unique, a little bit more unique about this plan, and comparative to other things that are going on around it. Again, like we said, we've got a 2-acre park that is the center of this property. Around the park, comparatively, you know, we looked at a lot of projects that were going on around this area. The baseline for what we were looking at was Scottsdale Quarter and Kierland. These are successful mixed-use projects that are directly adjacent. But the other developments that are going on that are around this area, again, are Optima, the district at the Quarter, Madera, Optima, Kierland, Scottsdale and Bell, the Quincy. These are all developments that are really focused on residential only for the most part. And their acreage and density is substantially above what we're proposing here for this project. These are the locations of some of these. Again, what we want to do is create a project that is uniquely Scottsdale, and that's reflective of Scottsdale's community. And to be able to say this, on this side of Scottsdale Road, this is how Scottsdale does mixed-use development. And on the other side of Scottsdale Road, again, on the Phoenix side, on the west side, the developments, again, are creating kind of unabated walls along Scottsdale Road. These are up to 78 feet, 83 feet, and even at Scottsdale and Bell, it's up to 176 feet. So there's a difference in how these projects are being developed and done with how we're doing work here. So the approach, again, was to contrast what's been done and do something different. These are a comparative analysis of the presence of the project on Scottsdale Road. As we know, Scottsdale is the main thoroughfare. It's our city street that runs north-south that connects the entire city. And the idea was to approach the project and create openness and a great streetscape along Scottsdale Road, not to create a wall of building, but to have a significant amount of one-story space or open space so that people that are traveling along Scottsdale Road, be it by car or by foot, actually still maintain views out to the McDowell Mountains. That this project is not creating a wall, is not creating a canyon, but it actually has openness in contrast to other things that are going on here. And even portions of the project that have height to it, it is, again, recessed. It's pulled back, like on this portion that you see, the key map, the hotel piece, and the portion that comes out to Scottsdale Road. And even it is, in addition to the 25-foot setback, it's only a one-story portion. The height of the project is pulled back off Scottsdale Road, again, to create great view corridors. We'll go through a little bit of comparison here as well. You know, we understand both from feedback and how popular it's been that Scottsdale Quarter has been a pretty successful area. This is an overhead aerial comparison of the two projects. This project at the park is a very similar density, but you can tell just by the comparison that the amount of open space and the amount of space dedicated to the Central Park is impactful. You can visually see it here. This is not something that you're creating alleyways and narrow streetscapes. You're creating a real heart to this project and an open space that frankly just hasn't been seen here. We've got a lot of plazas like at Kierland and Scottsdale Quarter, and we have parks, but none of the parks are amenitized and none of the plazas are the size or the scale that you would need. So the scale that George was talking about creating here is a full scale up from what's present at Scottsdale Quarter or Kierland. It's about creating the next notch up to really be a home for the community, that everyone can come here and that it can host the scale of events that would attract everyone to be here and to call this place home. Again, a little bit of comparison as well with regard to the frontage on Scottsdale Road. Scottsdale Quarter is about 20%, and the park is at 50%. So this is the one-story or zero-story open along Scottsdale Road. The open space comparison, again, with either one story or no stories, you're looking at just under 2 acres for Scottsdale Quarter and over 7 acres for the park. To give you a little bit of scale of the size of the open space, the newly renovated Civic Plaza outside of our doors here is actually, the West Bowl is actually a comparable space to what's being created here. So again, this is when we've talked about community events and really having a home for the community. It's events like the egg hunt for Halloween, or for Easter, the Halloween. All the major city activities here are done in a scale of space at the Civic Center. So this is what we're looking to create. Again, a comparison of Kierland versus Scottsdale Quarter and the park. We're almost at 2 football fields with 2 acres. And the point is also for the park to not just be an open space, but the linchpin of it is to have really innovative ideas about sustainability that are embedded here. The northern portion of the park here is going to be dedicated to reaching out to the community and essentially educating everyone about the newest innovation in sustainability. The first one that we're doing, we're calling it Innovation Plaza, but the first item that would be on display there would be a product called Hydro Panel by Source, which is a panel that actually takes the humidity out of the air, filters it through solar power, and then it turns it into potable drinking water. So things like this would be partnering with products or with companies to advertise and to have a place here and to dedicate a place that you're looking for the newest technology that from a sustainability platform that again that you can reach out and educate the community. As that transitions into the sustainability side of what we're doing, I just want to focus on probably the single most meticulous part and probably impactful part. There's another list here that we'll follow up with, but I'd be remiss if we didn't spend a little bit more time on the effort that's been spent a little bit by myself and the landscape team, but mostly by Mr. Faki with the multiple city departments to come up with a really pretty incredible idea about actually capturing stormwater instead of just wastewater going back up to be treated up north and recharged into the aquifer, but about building a vault underneath a garage, housing the water, and then recharging stormwater that's captured. Instead of losing it downstream, down south, we would be recharging and putting the stormwater back and piping it back up to be recharged into the aquifer. So the The net of that is almost 5 million gallons a year of additional potable water that's essentially falling from the sky and would essentially be lost downstream. But it's capturing it, gathering it, and putting it back into our system. In combination with the condensate from the entire project that's going to be redirected and vaulted, as well as the savings that's been done through the retrofit of the promenade, you're looking at 7.75 million gallons of water a year that's being conserved here. And that's independent of the low flow technology, everything that we are doing with regard to the reduction of the use in these uses. So we're also aggressively impacting the low flow with regard to the residential fixtures, commercial fixtures. Everything on this project is aggressively pursuing conservation of water. This is the list of a summary list, but again, we're looking at not only the water, the landscape design has got runnels and runoffs for harvesting water on the site, as well as capturing it in the vault. But again, this is a keystone of low impact development. We're looking at the building load reduction from an energy standpoint, automated and high performance systems, both from mechanical and lighting that we're integrating in here. The heat island mitigation is through permeable paving, cool roofs. We are looking at well and healthy building design. So again, through materials, technology, and lifestyle, these are the things that go into the building design, both programming and skin design. And then again, like we mentioned, taking the sustainability aspect, instead of just doing something that's stagnant in time, we are actually doing something that could change over time and harnessing the newest technologies to show off to the community. So I'm already over my time, so I want to give John a chance to come up and conclude. I feel like
You're fine.
tried to go really fast with that. So.
Did we get the questions covered that had been submitted? Or-
Commissioner Ortel, I had some concluding comments, if you don't.
Oh, okay.
Before we got to questions, if you don't mind. Thanks, Jeff. Chair, members of the commission, I'm going to summarize our efforts here. As you know, I like to give a list of the community benefits. And these are no particular order, but we're going to invest over $1 billion on this piece of property, and we're going to transform an eyesore into something very, very special. And as Jeff talked about, when 99% of the people that are in Scottsdale or visiting this area are going to drive down Scottsdale Road, and when they look to the west or they look to the east, we want there to be a visible differentiation between those sides of the street. And even though the Phoenix or west side of the street, they have a post office address that reads Scottsdale, and man, do they sell it that way. But we want them to know the actual difference between those. On the corner of Scottsdale Road and Bell will be a 176-foot tall building 9 feet away from the road. On our side, what is there? A spire that celebrates Frank Lloyd Wright. That road is Bell Road in Phoenix, and in Scottsdale, it's Frank Lloyd Wright Boulevard. Well, darn it, we want that to read in the architecture and the massing and the landscape and the setbacks and the step backs and the open space as you go down Scottsdale Road. We want to create something uniquely Scottsdale, and that's what we're really doing here. It's a unique location, it's a unique owner, it's a unique opportunity for innovation, and this project at this point in time is a unique opportunity for our city. Let's talk about some firsts. We always like to try and come forward with some firsts on these major projects for Scottsdale. And Jeff talked about this stormwater capture, thanks to this idea from Mr. Fakih. This hasn't been done before, to our knowledge, in the state. I don't know, it may have been done other places. But the idea of capturing stormwater and storing it and then metering it into the sewer system over time so it can be treated and then utilized by the city, and we get recharge credits, it's a new source of water coming from the sky that we get to take advantage of. Innovative, outside-the-box thinking, which is what Scottsdale is known for, which its staff is known for, we hope this commission continues to be known for, and we hope the council as well. The Promenade Shopping Center, we talked about that retrofit, the Innovation Plaza, which Jeff talked about. Another first is Jeff is going to design a first in the city net zero office building shop, net zero. Now, in a couple weeks on the agenda for council is a sustainability plan and a heat island plan, all these types of things. Well, gosh darn it, the private sector is partnering with the public sector here, and we're helping to lead the way. And this is a first for our city. Let's talk about carbon offset for a minute. We wanted to do something genuine about carbon offsets. And again, the city is looking at a net zero and sustainability strategy. And we looked into the traditional ways of doing this, which is buying carbon credits to grow trees or not let them be cut down in places in Georgia or Brazil or some other place. And Jeff Brand had this idea. He's like, let's think local, folks. Why don't we do something here locally instead of paying to not cut down trees or plant trees in someplace else? The idea was, let's put more trees in and plant more here in our city. What did that look like? We will be planting 786 trees on this site. Let me say that again, 786 trees. The density of tree covers is substantially larger than the density of tree covers outside the door in our Signature Plaza. That, according to the calculations done by folks who know, is an offset of 47 tons of carbon annually. The other thing we've done that's a first is why focus just on our piece of property? Why don't we help the city's efforts to look at carbon offset, heat island mitigation? We're going to do the first ever we're aware of contribution to the city's urban forestry efforts, and we're going to contribute $150,000, which should, depending on what kind of trees, what size they are, but we're estimating about 250 trees that can be planted around the city, not on this site. And that's an additional 15 tons of carbon offset. This kind of blew me away. Over 1,000 trees get planted. Over 1,000 trees. Now, another first is a technology collaboration with educators and STEM students through the Scottsdale School District. These efforts are in process with the Scottsdale Community College and with ASU. The final first is 10% workforce housing. Now, that's not a first, and I noticed that Councilwoman Littlefield and Councilwoman Whitehead were the progenitors and the driving force behind that several years ago, and we finally got our first voluntary private sector workforce housing project approved just less than 2 years ago, and the private sector is responding. And what's new about this isn't the 10%, which we're doing, but the 10 years. We're doing it for 10 years. When we started this process, it was 5 years. And then on the last project we brought forward, it was 8 years. And now it is 10 years. And that is the number that other communities around the country use when they're looking at workforce housing. Now, as you know, workforce housing is for first responders, healthcare workers, fire, police, teachers, those income levels. So there will be 98 new workforce housing residents in this community. There are no taxpayer dollars involved, and it's a 100% voluntary effort on behalf of the private sector. Now think of the impacts of over 1,000 new trees planted in our city in terms of the urban heat island impacts. In terms of the economic impacts, according to the Seidman Institute at ASU, whom we hired to do this, the new construction tax revenue directly to the city, these aren't the indirect benefits, this isn't the amorphous, this is the direct revenue impact to the city on a $1 billion plus project is almost $84 million to the city. The annual tax revenue directly to the city is estimated by Seidman at ASU to be just about $94 million. As staff notes, this implements the general plan, it implements the Air Park Character Area Plan. This will generate less traffic than the existing C4. This is a vacant piece of property today, but it has C4 zoning on it. And someday, something's going to go there if this case is denied, and it has C4 zoning. It implements the city's 5-year economic development strategic plan. As Jeff pointed out, our densities in terms of residential is lower than anything in the area. We're at 38 to the acre. Optima McDowell Mountain was at 61 to the acre. It supports Air Park area small businesses. There will be no short-term rentals. Promenade and Mr. Kurtz are looking at the idea of solar power, the potential to use covered parking lots, put solar canopies, which helps urban heat island impacts, and also their roofs. They will have cool roofs no matter what, but also looking at solar potentially on the roof. If they're able to achieve what they would like to achieve, it would generate electricity for 928 homes annually. We have increase the open space by 20% over what's required. Jeff talked about the 2-acre Central Park, and we've called it Central Park for a reason. The Central Park in New York is not on either one of the rivers. It's in the center, surrounded by activity. The luxury hotel that we're talking about would support tourism and generate bed tax. And finally, the last sheet, greater building setbacks and lower building heights than allowed along all streets. We are not maxing this out. Along the way, we reduced our heights and reduced our density and reduced our intensity of this project from when we first started this proposal by listening to the community. Bike-centric campus, there will be 4 public bike stations in this. These are public bike stations in addition to what's inside each of the residential buildings or the office building. We'll be working with the Stardust Foundation to ensure that we can adaptively reuse and recycle the building materials on site and the construction materials. Staff referenced this, but I also want to note that we got a unanimous recommendation for approval from the Airport Commission. Now, the Airport Commission, they know the airport, and they are very protective of the airport. They do not want residential development that isn't going to enhance the airport, that isn't employing sound attenuation requirements. And I will tell you that the Airport Advisory Commission recommended this project unanimously. They had no hesitation other than no blinking lights on the top of it. So no issues with the heights of the buildings like there was with another project that came through recently in terms of aviation safety. None of those issues came to the front. Aviation staff and the Aviation Commission were unanimous in recognizing the benefit to the airport, with no safety or long-term issues regarding noise or concerns about the airport. Chair Higgs, members of the commission, I'm happy to answer whatever questions you might have, and if I can't do it, we've got a bevy of consultants here who are much more articulate and better equipped than I am.
Thank you, sir. Commissioner Kaminsky, did you get your questions answered?
I have 4
You have more.
pages of
Okay,
questions.
great.
You want everyone else to go first, or you want me to start?
Go ahead.
Okay. If you could clarify the workforce housing, you indicated there were 98. I was trying to do the math with the number of residences proposed, 1,138. Where did the 10% of what come from?
Chair Higgs, members of the commission, Commissioner McKinsky, I would say I was never good at math, which is why I became a lawyer, but that's not quite accurate. That number, and we should have clarified this with staff, and it's our bad for not doing that. But the workforce housing component of this will be for those that are for lease, not those that are for sale. So there are 2 buildings that are for sale condo buildings that are not for lease buildings. So the 10% is taken from those that are for lease because those that are buying their units, I don't think are going to want to participate in that.
Okay, thank you. I'm glad you got a copy of what I sent earlier, and staff did answer some of those questions. I've got them paginated by the pages in the report. Page 9 was about the setbacks and the condition 7, so we can address that at the end, but thank you for being willing to add that recognition of the utilities for setbacks. On page 100, I was wondering if there was discussion about the location of the parking garage that's located on the street front on the south, and whether that, any consideration, and this is more of a design issue, not zoning, but flipping that with the park green area so that that was more visible and accessible to the public, and putting the parking structure more centrally located.
Chair Higgs, members of the commission, Commissioner Kaminsky, we looked at multiple options and ideas. As you can imagine, we've been at this for, I don't know, David, 2 years, 3 years, I forget where we are on this now. We looked at a lot of the options. But the concept really was not to celebrate parking. It was not to make this a car-centric or parking-centric project by putting parking structure at the middle of the project. The vision really was to create, like we talked about, a true central park, not one that's just on either river, the Hudson or the East River in New York, for example, but to create a central gathering spot, much like the Civic Center outside our door here is interior and is utilized and celebrated by a hotel, by restaurants, by the Center for the Arts, by City Hall. If it were entirely on Indian School Road or another road, it might change the quality and character of it. But this is also a very different area than the area where this project is located. If you were to locate it south of Tierra Buena, as you brainstormed in your email, One of the concerns would be that it would be a public space that would only be 180 degrees because you'd have a busy road that's going to have a signal there. On the south side of Tierra Buena, for now anyway, is a gas station, a car wash, and a budget hotel. And what the vision is for this, to attract the best and the brightest and what the city's goals are in their economic development plan, to attract the best and the brightest knowledge workers in the country to live here, we don't think that that is the catalyst for that feel to it. And Jeff talked about these current ones where we have plazas, little, I don't say little because we bring them to you, but plazas. And we have city parks that provide, publicly funded recreation for our community. But no one is doing what's right outside our door. The private sector has not done what's right outside our door, which create a space comparable to that for the use of the public. And there's nothing like that in North Scottsdale or North Central Scottsdale. There's nothing like that. So the idea is, let's create that energy and that synergy of a true central park with an area that's as large as out there that we can program, that we can celebrate, that we can use, the community can use.
Okay.
So yes, we looked at all those options, and it's a great idea, but with 28 acres of land, we had such a unique, special opportunity here to transform something that we all fell in love with this. Now, we may be myopic, but we fell in love with it.
Thank you. On page 6, there was discussion about the phasing, and I'd like you to kind of go over the phasing a little bit, because I see that the stipulations refer to first phase of development within 7 years, but then there's also reference to the first phase occurring over the first 3 years. And I'm trying to understand, again, kind of the math behind how this phasing is going to work and what we can expect at the end of 7 years. And that's followed with a question probably for your traffic engineer, because the traffic study referenced on page 177 is referring to a build out of the project by 2025, which doesn't even account for the 2030 7-year phasing of phase 1.
Chair Higgs, members of the commission, Commissioner Kaminsky, and I say this kind of tongue-in-cheek, which is you're expecting rational thought to apply to some of this process. And I say that tongue-in-cheek in a way because there are different documents for different scenarios. So the development agreement talks about if you don't commence construction on this within 7 years of the project, within 7 years, then you got to come back and the city has the right, or you have to downzone the property back to C4. And I think as staff's response to you and their email back to you noted that the projects that have come forward in the past with development agreements have had a 5-year time limitation. And that's kind of been the standard. And the rationale for going to 7 years here is that this is a 28, the other projects have not been anywhere near, they're one little, I shouldn't say little, one piece of property, not a 28-acre build from scratch, $1 billion plus mixed-use project. Our intention, and this is why this goes to the traffic analysis, our intention was and is to start construction on this as soon as possible. If we're lucky enough to get approval through this process, we'd like to proceed with phase 1 immediately and start going through the DR process and pull permits and build phase 1 immediately. We'd like to go on to phases 2 through whatever it is. If we could do it at once, we'd do that too. Maybe we're able to. But what we can't predict is someone who's getting ready to invest $1 billion, and you can't say, oh, because of a pandemic, because of interest rates that have doubled, because of a great recession. You just can't anticipate all of the acts of God or changes that can occur that would force you to say, we can't build it right now. We want to, but we just can't do it. So with a $1 billion project with 28 acres, 7 years when 5 has kind of been the standard, seemed to, in terms of scaling, make a lot of sense. And as to the traffic, we intend to start immediately, which is why you have a 2025 and then a 2030 horizon on the traffic, because that is the 7 years the worst case, the 3-year on phase 1 is a practical number. So we don't know how to do it any other way other than the damn lawyers, and that's not me, but the lawyers make a plan for the worst and paper around the worst. But in terms of the practical world, we anticipate getting going immediately and hope those 2025 numbers are reality because we're up and going.
Thank you. So for a follow-up to that, if there's 12 buildings with the infrastructure that's proposed, would we be anticipating 12 phases, 3 phases? How many phases?
Chair Higgs, members of the commission, Commissioner Kaminsky, if I could predict that, I would stop being a lawyer and go to Vegas and bet on a football game or something. We just can't predict. We don't know. And for me to say otherwise would be disingenuous. No one knows what the market's doing and what interest rates are doing and where demands will be. What we do know is that the mere fact that this project has been highlighted in some traditional press and news articles, the response has been crazy in terms of interest, even in this economy. It's been crazy. And we do have the benefit of an individual with extensive financial wherewithal.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, sir. I guess I have a couple of questions for you and for Jeff. I guess my first question would be is, if you get the permits that you're looking for and you go ahead for the development, then is the project going to be basically shovel ready to start, or are there some other limiting factors that you know of that might take a little bit more precedence on it?
Chair Higgs, members of the commission, and Commissioner Gonzalez, great question. We have no idea. Right now, this is what in the real estate vernacular, which you'll appreciate, is a pretty clean project, pretty clean piece of property. But we just can't anticipate. What will take the longest is taking all of these images you've seen and what Commissioner Kaminsky and many of her comments, which were all great comments, and translating all of these things into plans that we can bring forward to DRB. And that's going to take a lot of time. And once we get those approved, then we've got to do the construction drawings and get them reviewed and approved by staff, which takes a long time. And because of shortages, it's taking even longer these days. So we'd like it to be shovel ready very soon. And as of now, we don't see anything that we haven't anticipated, but that doesn't mean that we can anticipate everything.
Okay, I guess my next question would be just in general knowledge. This is not to be a pointed question just because of any particular ownership or anything like that, but at this point, because we've seen so many different developments happen that they're trying to get zoning, they're trying to get planning, they're trying to get things going, but yet they don't own the land. They have only options on the land, and therefore by having options on the land, sometimes it takes them another year to pull the trigger to buy something. Can you just tell me basically how this is going to work?
Sure. Chair Higgs, Commissioner Gonzalez, Mr. Kurtz owns this in an existing entity. He's owned it for how long? Almost 2 years. So this is not, and many times you're familiar with real estate transactions, someone has that option to buy a piece of property because they don't want to spend any money other than on the entitlement process till they know they've got entitlements because they don't want to buy a piece of property without entitlements. Mr. Kurtz bought this property as if it were entitled and paid a very large sum for it. And this is not somebody who is sitting around waiting. He owns this property, he's got a dream, and he'd like to execute as quickly as possible.
Very, very good. When I have time, I'd like to ask Jeff a question. Is it time to ask the architect? Thank you for coming. Jeff, Mr. Brand, is there been any look at in your designs for creating shade structures within the program, kind of similar to like what ASU is doing, and technologically what they're creating is shade structures with solar panels on top and everything, creating both shade and an efficient way of manipulating the utilities?
Yeah, the short answer to that is yes. Shade is certainly a cornerstone of creating walkable streetscapes, so I think inevitably we've been looking at the shading analysis of all public ways where any pedestrian is going to be occupying, but also looking at the opportunity for rooftops as well as parking shading and the piece that's on top of the garage as an opportunity for a built shade structure that's also doubling as a solar panel and a renewable source of energy. So, yeah, the shading on site is at 75%, so that's the a significant increase from what's mandated. But I think yes, if you're talking about from a technology, there is. I think the caveat to that is that you've got to make sure that a lot of times canopies or shading structures are attached to buildings, and so there's not as much lengthy direct exposure to sunlight. So rooftops are much better suited for that. But yes, certainly there's an opportunity there for as much capture as possible on site.
Very good. Thank you, sir. Mr. Berry?
I'm seeing that as an opportunity for the Innovation Plaza to put something like that up there with shade with the solar built in, but yeah.
Okay, and then I guess probably my last question is that if you don't anticipate any real problems as far as utilities or anything, maybe I should ask Mr. Clough that if he has any knowledge of any kind of utilities, easements, or any property easements that might hamper the development.
Chair Higgs, Commissioner Gonzalez, and Planning Commissioners. The site in its current condition is actually pretty clean of easements. It doesn't appear that there's any that are conflicting with the proposed development. If they were, those are things we're usually able to work through with the developer to release and relocate. For new utilities, there would be new easements associated with those that would be designed in accordance with the development.
Thank you. I was more looking at things that would hamper their ability to perform, their due diligence so that they can proceed. That's was mainly my biggest question, because a lot of these projects nowadays have a lot of issues with them as far as the legality of the easements and stuff. And if they're looking at a clean slate, it's definitely a lot easier to deal with. And therefore, they can probably move a little bit more efficiently. So thank you, Mr. Berry, and I appreciate your time.
Thank you, Chair Higgs, Commissioner Gonzalez. This image right here, we should have talked to you about this for just a second if I could. So this is looking towards Scottsdale Road from the condominium building that anchors the 2-acre Central Park. So up here would be Scottsdale Road. Over here would be residential. Over here would be the hotel amenitized condominiums, which is the single one tall building on site at 119 feet, even though the zoning category allows 134 feet. So we have one building. And by the way, the buildings at Scottsdale Corridor are 90 feet. This would be the hotel over here. So let me just give you an idea of those kind of distances. So here is the condo building that anchors the project and the Central Park, and that view is from here looking to the west to the main entrance across the Central Park with one-story buildings on either side and lots of open space. Remember, 51% of this is one-story or no-story open space. And what you will look out on over here are very tall, ugly buildings in the city of Phoenix. No, I did not say that. I did not say that. So I just want you to get an idea of why we chose that image to highlight the project.
Thank you, sir.
Chair Higgs, do you have questions?
No, I am good so far, thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Serena?
I'd like to hear from the public comment first.
Okay.
Yeah.
How about you?
Thank you, Commissioner Hotel. Mr. Berry, while I love your orations, maybe I could have Jeff Brand come back up. Mr. Brand, can you put the site plan that Mr. Berry just had up and just sort of walk us through the program that is before us today, what each building is, maybe work through it systematically, where you think the commercial is going to land, the condos, the apartments, the office, parking, hotel. Sure. If you could just walk us through the
Absolutely.
entire 28 acres.
Yeah, real quick. So essentially, the location of the uses, we did want to make sure that we are gathering the impactful commercial uses that are fronting on Scottsdale Road. So the bottom left-hand corner at the intersection of Tierboyne and Scottsdale Road is the office building. So it's over 100,000 square feet of Class A office that's being planned there. Now, I will, in answering, responding to Commissioner Kaminsky's comment with the parking garage, it is located, the primary user of the parking Monday through Friday is the office use. So the adjacency of the garage is everywhere else it's a supplemental use for the restaurants and probably valet for the hotel, which will come down there and use it in addition to some on-site parking for the hotel, but the office is the main driver of the parking function on the site. Therefore, the adjacency of the parking garage to the office. North of that is an outdoor working plaza, so it's actually a plaza that's meant for full Wi-Fi, electronic capability, and charging for people to enjoy outdoor working space. There's 2 restaurants that are flanking the entry, a 1-level restaurant that's associated with a hotel, porte cochere, and entry, and then the 5-star hotel that occupies the intersection up at Scottsdale Road and Paradise Lane. Directly to the east of the hotel, the 5-star hotel, is the branded condominiums, which share resources and are directly associated with them. Directly to the east of that is the first multifamily parcel. The luxury condo, or the condo portion, is at the central east end of the plan, at the foot or the backside of the Central Park, and then 2 other multifamily options on the southeast corner and then on the south side of the Central Park. And it was intentional to make sure that the Central Park was something that didn't have roadways. I have small children, so I get anxiety with kids running around a park adjacent to roadways. That's why we do actually have the multifamily with restaurants anchoring the south side, so they don't have full circular access to roadways around the side. And then you've got the 2 restaurants that sort of enclose and flank in the north side. But that's the basic layout from a use perspective of the site plan. Are there any further questions?
I appreciate it, Mr. Brand.
And I apologize for not mentioning that. I was trying to get through that presentation.
No, thank you very much. I've seen something similar to this being done in Texas in the Woodlands, and it was a very successful project. And this has a lot of those earmarks to that successful project, and so far what I see I like very much. So thank you for walking us through this. That's all I have for right now. I'd like to hear what the public comments are as well.
Thank you, sir. My first question is probably for staff. In the write-up, it said workforce housing for 5 years. Then I believe I had heard later it was 8 years, and tonight Mr. Berry says 10 years. And I don't doubt that it'll be 10 years, but does that get revised in the write-up? That how does that get memorialized that it's 10 years and not 5?
Yes, Chair Higgs, Commissioner Ertel. The terms around the workforce housing are in the development agreement, which is, those terms are still being negotiated and they'll be presented to the council when the case moves forward. The best information we had at the time that this report was drafted was the 5 years.
Sure, I understand that.
So it'll be updated as it moves forward to the city council, and it'll match what's in the development agreement.
Okay, great. I just didn't know how that worked. I didn't know if we needed special language like Commissioner Kaminsky will need for her point. So anyway, that takes care of that. Commissioner Kaminsky also mentioned traffic, which of course is a favorite for me. I noticed that the project will account for an additional 10% of traffic on to Scottsdale Road. And my first reaction was, wow. My second reaction was looking at the existing volume versus capacity of Scottsdale Road. That's manageable, but that's just me looking at that. So I would like your comments on how the existing infrastructure, Scottsdale Road primarily, will be able to accommodate the additional traffic.
Chair Higgs, Commissioner Ertel, was that for staff or for?
Oh, that's for you and your team, yes.
Okay, thank you.
Unless staff would like to opine on that, I assume that Mr. Kirchner has looked at this and has said no objection. I mean, that's how it came across in the write-up. So unless I'm mistaken, I guess the question then is for
Chair
Mr.
Higgs,
Berry and his team.
Commissioner Ertel, yes, the TEMA was accepted by staff with the recommendations that are in the report. If I could gain a little altitude on traffic, you know, when I started this, I talked about this as a unique site. One of the things unique about it is you got the city of Phoenix on the other side. City of Phoenix is not showing the restraint that we have in terms of the quality or quantity of our development. If they have the ability to go to 120 feet, they ask for 176, and they get it. If they want densities of 110 to the acre across the street from this, which are already approved and under construction, they get it. So Scottsdale Road is something that we share a boundary with development on the other side of the street, which we don't control. The other thing I would tell you is that this property has C4 zoning. So it's vacant right now. So this C4 zoning, interestingly, and this is out of the staff report, it says the C4 district provides space for the heaviest type of commercial activities found in the city. So this vacant 32 acres will have some type of development on it. Will it be all C4? Will someone come back for a zoning if this were denied? Who knows? But it's going to get developed. But what we do know is that when you look at the quality of a mixed-use project, which is kind of the touchstone for traffic engineers, is to have those mix of uses on site. When you look at other mixed-use projects in the area, like south of us, like 1,200 feet south of us, we ran this comparison, and our mixed use, when compared to Scottsdale Corridor as a mixed-use project, generates 63% less daily traffic than Scottsdale Corridor. So if you picked up Scottsdale Corridor with all of its uses and transplanted the same size parcel onto this vacant parcel, you would have more traffic. Now the difference, of course, is Scottsdale Corridor is heavy on office and it's heavy on retail, and those generate a lot more cars. The other thing that we wanted to talk about was if we looked at traffic counts in the area, and this is, I think, a question that Commissioner Kaminsky had in her email, was traffic has gone down, and why is that? I don't know necessarily why. I can conjecture, but it's not worth much. But they put the city puts the counters out on the road, or they hire people to do it, and then they count, and we get the numbers, whatever they are. So let's look at Scottsdale Road from Paradise Lane up to Frank Lloyd Wright. Pre-COVID in 2018, this was the traffic count, 39,000 cars a day on Scottsdale Road in that segment. Now in 2022, a couple years after the pandemic, and what's changed? Work from home. Are you kidding? That's what's changed. It's spread out the trips, and we don't have the peaks and the rush hours anymore. So that has resulted in 12% reduction. That's a 12% reduction in traffic on Scottsdale Road in that segment. In that same segment, what's the capacity left? If you look at year 2030 for this traffic, including this project being built, there's still available 14% capacity on that road after we are built. Let's look at the next segment on Scottsdale Road, from Greenway Hayden Loop to Paradise Lane. Pre-COVID, post-COVID, traffic counts down 14%. Do you remember when we would be in this Kiva and people would say traffic is getting terrible, and the traffic counts would show huge increases in traffic on Scottsdale Road, Hayden, other streets. But the reality is work from home is for real, and it's here to stay. What about capacity on that segment of Scottsdale Road? Well, in year 2030, there'll still be 20% capacity left on Scottsdale Road at that point, and that takes into account all the planned development. Now, the Institute of Traffic Engineers in our most recent edition do acknowledge the impact on work from home, but man, I thought lawyers were obtuse. I think engineers sometimes are better. But what they talk about is the fact that work from home is here to stay. It's expected to remain higher than it was pre-pandemic. Duh. This shift will likely result in an overall reduction in weekly peak period commuting trips. In other words, rush hours getting better, traffic volumes are going down. And I've got additional data here on work from home and how prevalent it is, but that's really not relevant other than we have to recognize it's real. So, Commissioner Ertel, in terms of traffic, yes, I think the Transportation Department accepted the TEMA, and part of the reason that our numbers look better over time is because we have to implement all the things that the Transportation Department wants us to implement, and we have to pay for them, whether it's putting in traffic signals, widening roads, decel lanes, additional turn lanes at intersections, whatever it might be. They list all the things that we are required to do, and in the stipulations it says we've got to do all the things the Transportation Department wants us to do. with the lawyerly caveat that it has to be legal and reasonable. So that's the reality of the future of traffic in this area. One, we don't control it because of the Phoenix. Two, mixed use is the best use for traffic for this 28 or 32 acres. And three, traffic counts are actually going down because work from home is here to stay. Happy to answer, get into greater detail, or have Jamie get into greater detail if you'd like.
That works for me. Thank you very much. We have two requests for public comments. Jada Alexander. Oh, that's not Jada. Sorry about that. Can't read.
Thanks, Commissioner Ertel. Jason Alexander, 7578 East Sundown Court. A lot of you know me outside of this hearing, in a political context, but my day job for the past 26 years has actually been as a software engineer. 23 years of that has been spent in the Valley, 14 while living in Scottsdale. First thing I want to show you, if I can get the overhead for just a second, is a site called Greg's List. Not Craigslist, Greg's List. This site is an incredible site for software engineers because in a lot of the major software markets, it lists all the known software companies and breaks them down by established companies, startups, that sort of thing. And what you'll see right here is this lists 784 companies in the Phoenix area. When you do a further refined search onto Scottsdale, and I know it's a little bit hard to read here, but I encourage you to do this, you will see that 276 of Phoenix's 784 companies are located in Scottsdale. We basically have 1/3 of the software development community right here in Scottsdale. It's a pretty amazing ecosystem. And I was actually really tickled to see Mr. Berry's presentation, his slide from 2021, where he did speak about that ecosystem and the city's goals of furthering it. When I moved to Scottsdale, I was working at SkySong for Ticketmaster, and I'd been there for some years. And you never know in software if the product line you're working on is going to be pulled, if it's going to explode, if it's going to be cut off, if your company's going to run out of funding. It's a very dynamic industry. But I knew moving to Scottsdale that there were so many jobs that I would always find another employment, and that has been the case since I've lived here. It's an incredible ecosystem as an employee. You have a lot of choice. You have a lot of decision-making ability. And the flip side of that is for an employer, you join an existing ecosystem, you know there is just an incredible density of employees who are qualified and can staff your business. You might have the best software idea in the world, but if you open out in Queen Creek and no one can come work for you, you're simply not going to be successful if you don't have the talent nearby to staff your company. So this project, in terms of that ecosystem, is going to further contribute it, feed it, lead it. And what does that do for a city? Well, you get high-paying jobs. You get low-impact jobs. I myself have been working from home full-time for almost 6 years. I've worked from home 2 to 3 days a week since 2006. So no traffic or minimal traffic, no negative externalities other than maybe a little bit of office space and a little bit of parking. The promise of that ecosystem is why the city got so intensely behind SkySong. It's why we've invested in the Cure Corridor, different domain, of course, healthcare, but the same concept, and it's why I think this is such a great idea. So it's an incredible project. I know you're going to work on the zoning and make it better. It is obviously a big, bold project where we do need to make it perfect for Scottsdale, and I know that'll come, but I urge you to keep in mind the promise of what it can be simply as a job creator, a revenue creator. You're talking about jobs that are largely recession-proof, largely COVID-proof, and again, knowledge workers, low impact, working from home, high salaries generally, and starting up their own businesses here in the community. So it's just an incredible influx of talent and potentially salaries to the community. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Mr. Alexander. I would say next up is Jim Keeley, except I butchered Jason, so I probably butchered your name as well. But please give us your name again correctly and your address.
Thank you. Jim Keeley. My home address is 9785 East Doubletree Ranch Road in Scottsdale, and my office is on Raintree Boulevard. I'm a commercial real estate broker, and I've been working the Scottsdale Air Park since 1981. When I started, there was 1 million square feet of buildings, and today there's 48 million square feet of buildings. So day to day, I'm out trying to attract companies to come to the Scottsdale Air Park, and I've had a chance to either sell the land, lease the building, or sell the building, and many times do all three, 2 or 3 times. And I got to say that I've seen the Scottsdale Air Park evolve. I make a habit of also looking at other projects around the country, around the world, and I visited the Las Colinas in Dallas, the Denver Tech Center, the Irvine John Wayne Airport area, the Research Triangle Park in North Carolina, and recently Hudson's Park in New York. And with those ideas, I'm always bringing back some ideas to the developers coming to the Scottsdale Air Park, to the City Council, in various parts. The subject property, I was very excited to be involved in helping to bring that to transition from the Herberger family that owned it for the last 30 years to George Kurtz. And the site was really never for sale, but 9 years ago now, we started getting people wanting to try and acquire the site. And Judd Herberger was the remaining Herberger at the time. So I worked with Judd through literally 8 years of various developers that were going to maybe kind of have the money or not, and various plans. Some of those you probably saw here. La Villa was one of the plans. And when George Kurtz arrived on the scene, I mean, it was just the most amazing buyer you could ever dream of having. A tech billionaire who really wanted to buy this and make it a legacy for him and his family, not a typical developer that's going to rezone it, start selling off parcels to apartment developers. I mean, he is the guy. So I'm a long-term air park guy. I expect to still be here for a long time. My son, Tommy Keeley, is working with me now. So, you know, we're kind of shepherds of the air park and really, really excited to see this going forward. Thank you.
Thank you. I take it the applicant would like to respond to that.
Chair Higgs, members of the commission, I have no rebuttal to those comments.
All right. Thank you very much. That being the case, if there are no other comments,
I'm not going to make any comment. I was going to make a motion if you're going to close out public comment.
okay, if that's the case, and if it's a positive one, please confer with Commissioner Kaminsky on language for, I think it's point number 7. I thought I would forget, but I didn't.
Sure. Shall I read that in and then you can, okay.
However you choose to do it, yes.
So this is from page 19 of the report. It's condition number 7, building setbacks. With the Development Review Board application, the applicant owner shall revise the building locations as necessary to comply with all building setback requirements of the PCP district. This is new text, with additional setback where needed to account for curb line relocations, utility easements, and deceleration lanes. And that's applicable to all the streets, not just Scottsdale Road.
Okay, and I believe that Commissioner Gonzalez was making a motion. Is that part of the motion? I mean, is that, how do you want to do that?
I was just going to make a motion for approval, but I was going to let her read her stipulation into the record.
Okay, so if you read say your motion, we will assume that what Commissioner Kaminsky just said fits into the back end of it, if that works for Mr. Anderson.
Okay, I personally want to congratulate the thoughtfulness of the development. I would like to also say that The best part about a development of this size and everything is that we've seen over the history is that it always is best to have the developer and the design team and everybody work in continuum all the way through the whole project, rather than a developer just breaking apart the project piece by piece by piece by piece. The development always ends up as being a cohesive element and a much better quality if they have a continuum of the design team. And so with that, I'd like to move to make a recommendation to the Planning Council for approval of case 13ZN2022 per the staff recommendation stipulations based upon the finding that the planned Air Park core development bonus development standards have been met and the proposed zoning district map amendment is consistent and conforms with the adopted general plan.
With that, the Kaminsky language in there, does that work for you, Mr. Anderson?
Chair, temporary chair Ertel, I didn't hear that as part of Commissioner Gonzalez's motion, so I suggest maybe Commissioner Kaminsky could offer that as a friendly amendment to
that works.
Commissioner Gonzalez.
Can you read that again, please?
So with the motion that Commissioner Gonzalez made where it says per the staff recommended stipulations and an amendment to stipulation 7 as was read into the record by Commissioner Kaminsky based upon the findings, et cetera.
I assume that's acceptable to Commissioner Gonzalez, that a friendly amendment?
Yes, thank you very much.
After I ask for a second, and after the second, we have a motion to discuss, so we can discuss that before we call the roll. So do we have a second for that motion?
Second.
We have a second. Any further discussion on this? None? Well, I won't let you down. You've talked a lot about, what the project is like inside. And Mr. Alexander referred to what it's like outside. We did talk about traffic a little bit, but what strikes me about this is the incubator, the accelerator sort of nature. This is not for the technology per se, but for capital. It seems to me, and I may be wrong, but it seems to me that this is a magnet. It is a magnifier of seed capital, of series capital. It is to capital what SkySong is to technology. So to me, clearly it's got a big impact on Scottsdale. It's not just a project that sits there and does business. It's a project that does business across Scottsdale. So I think that's a huge plus. I said earlier that I was a little concerned about the traffic. I did what Mr. Berry did, go back and look at 2018. I also looked at 2020, which for the segment from Paradise to Frank Lloyd Wright was even higher, and then it's dropped down. Any way you look at it, though, even if you use the 2020 numbers, the road has the Scottsdale Road has the capacity to handle this additional traffic. Yes, it's more traffic. Yes, it increases delays a little bit, but the other way to look at it is this is at Shea Boulevard, which is where I live, and Shea Boulevard, 120, 130% of capacity. This is 90% of capacity. So to me, that's a plus. So having said that, it looks good too. It looks good. It adds stuff that Scottsdale needs, and the economics work. With that, can we call the roll?
Chair Higgs,
Yes.
Commissioner Gonzalez,
Yes.
Commissioner Kaminsky,
Yes.
Commissioner Ertel,
Yes.
Commissioner Scarborough,
Yes.
Commissioner Serena.
Yes.
Motion passes 6-0. Thank you.
Thank you all very much.
If John will relinquish the podium, Seems hard to get him away from that, but I'd like to move on to item number 3. No offense, you did a great job, but just moving along. Item number 3, 5 GP 2021 Old Town Character Area Plan Amendment, Phase 1, presented by Mr. Yaron.
Thank you, Chair Higgs on the phone, Commissioner Hertel, members of the Planning Commission, and Councilwoman Littlefield in the audience. My name is Adam Yaron. Can you hear me? My name is Adam Yaron, and I'm with the city's Long Range Planning Department. Before you this evening, I have a presentation on our Old Town Scottsdale Character Area Plan, Phase 1 update. To provide some background on this item, City Council provided direction to review, conduct public outreach, and update the 2018 Old Town Scottsdale Character Area Plan, the sections of the downtown zoning ordinance that relate to downtown, evaluate our downtown infill incentive district and plan, and finally, have review of our Old Town urban design and architectural guidelines. To provide some timeline to the background of this item, the start of this process really started in June of 2021 with the adoption of our current General Plan 2035 by City Council. That took place kind of right during the pandemic, and I'll mention the importance of that later on in the presentation. But shortly after City Council adopted that plan, there was an initiation to provide an Old Town update to those documents that we just covered on the prior slide. We had a series of City Council work study session and Planning Commission non-action meetings, and then in November of 2021, the voters ratified the current general plan. Following voter ratification, we had a series of public open houses that provided both in-person opportunities as well as self-guided open houses that were available online. We had, again, a number of different non-action meetings and work study sessions with both Planning Commission and Council. And we had a drafting of the plan and affected sections of the ordinance between June and October of 2022. Following that process, we went before City Council and had one-on-ones and received direction and commentary on that draft, and then finally presented a legislative draft to the public for review. In the instance of this policy document, when I say legislative draft, it's just a legislatively drafted document, not that it brings a regulatory importance, but rather it's a policy document to the public for their review of the plan. We had a series of 6 open houses and self-guided open houses in January of 2023, and then finally a work study session in January of 2023. At that point in time, we did decide to evaluate the overall process in which we brought these items before the public and decided to, as a point of next steps, break up the series of these updates so that we could provide a greater level of transparency and allow for the boards, commissions, and council to listen to and evaluate and consider each one of these updates to either a policy or regulatory document. In the instance of tonight's item, we're focusing solely on the Old Town Scottsdale Character Area Plan, which is a policy document. In terms of public notification, as I mentioned, the onset of this process really started during the pandemic, and so we used all of our tools in our toolbox to try and reach out to the public, both in email and print format, as well as try and key in on community groups that commonly involve themselves in Scottsdale update processes, as shown before you on screen. That resulted in a series of public participation events that, again, as I mentioned, were offered both in person and online, and I know a number of planning commissioners attended those events, and thank you very much for your input in those processes. As I mentioned just previously, again, tonight's item is specifically focusing on the policy document of the Old Town Scottsdale Character Area Plan, and while Council directed really 7 topics for community conversations for us to evaluate, the items in which we're bringing forward updates this evening really focus on vision and values, the definition of mixed use, the provision of open space, and the provision of quality development. As I mentioned, tonight's item, again, just to reinforce it, is that we're focusing on the Old Town Scottsdale Character Area Plan. And on the series of slides that we'll be presenting before you this evening, where you see yellow text, it's an instance in which we've incorporated a proposed draft amendment. And where orange text is indicated, it's really where we received public input directly from a citizen and have incorporated it so as to show really where the nexus of that comment came from directly. So to start on vision and values, to provide some background, the Old Town Scottsdale Character Area Plan has an established vision and values, which it shapes the physical form of downtown. It consists of 5 chapters covering land use, character and design, mobility, arts and culture, and economic vitality. Vision statements are inspirational, lofty, and ambitious. They don't often contain details or steps for achieving their goals. And the 2018 vision statement is the same as previously in the previous 2009 Old Town Plan, in which the establishment of that vision statement really took a 2-year process to provide, following that was the first time in which the then downtown plan was updated, following having been around since 1984. So a 25-year time frame resulted in a 2-year update process to the community's vision. That involved an extensive input from citizens and stakeholders, and so the intent of the values remain the same, but it's updated with more contemporary language in the 2018 vision statement. Now, as I mentioned to you previously, the start of this process really started with the general plan adoption by council and subsequent voter ratification in November of 2021. But this is the general plan vision statement, a citywide policy document in which there are associated aspirations, one of which is distinct character, which is on the bottom side portion of the screen. I know there's a lot of text on here, but I'll just focus on that the nod to Old Town was referenced in this aspiration, and that is that Scottsdale will respect and be sensitive to our history and legacy found in the heart of Old Town, which will define our sense of place. As such, what we heard from the public was support for vision and values as written, with support to revise the vision to remove the word metropolitan. That seemed to be a hot button for folks, and so what's proposed is we've updated the vision statement to remove metropolitan, and based on public comment received, we thought that it was an appropriate addition to add and maintains, so that the revised vision read as follows. Comprised of its unique districts, Old Town Scottsdale is a dynamic city center which recognizes and maintains its Western heritage while boldly looking to its future. Now, as I stated previously in the opening of this item, we'll be covering a couple different topics this evening. We just covered vision and values, and so if it would be appropriate, Commissioner Ertels and members of the commission, if there's any specific comments on this item, I'd like to address them now so that we can keep the process moving.
Anyone? Commissioner Scarborough.
Thank you, Commissioner Ertel. Mr. Rowan, I'm just going to bring up something that is more general than just this section, but I'm going to be the odd man out here and say that I really don't understand why we're calling the downtown core not the Old Town and the Old Town downtown. So for me, as I read all of this, it's really hard for me to get my head wrapped around why we're calling our downtown Old Town when it's the downtown core that has the least density, most Western or heritage style buildings, and why we're not calling that area Old Town and the rest of the downtown area what it is, and that's downtown. So as I look through this and I see that the lowest density of uses, the type 1, literally outline the downtown core boundary. To me, that speaks to the Old Town. The fact that we have a Western historic Old Town district in the downtown core, part of the Old Town of Scottsdale, is confusing beyond all. And I understand we're late in the process, but I'm just going to voice it again. This doesn't make sense to me. This should be downtown Scottsdale, and what is considered the downtown core should be considered Old Town, where the actual heritage of the city resides. I think it confuses a lot of people when they hear about development going on, and they hear that it's an Old Town. And I think that also confuses people on how they look at what project's going on. So the fact that type 1 development is allowed in this region, the lowest density use, it speaks to Old Town. So those are my thoughts, and it's general in nature, but I just wanted to voice it again. So thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Scarborough. Commissioner Gonzalez.
Should we let him go ahead and answer that and then continue on with the questions?
I'm sorry, say that again, I was distracted.
Should we let him answer, let Adam?
Oh, yeah,
answer that, and then
you want to respond to that?
Commissioner Ertel and Commissioner Scarborough, I'd be happy to answer this specific item that you bring up in terms of the push and pull, if you will, as to whether or not we call this part of the community Old Town or Downtown, has had robust community conversation in the past. In fact, this specific item was discussed at the onset by City Council, and City Council expressed a desire to keep the reference nomenclature as presented in the plan. With respect to the typology that you referenced of type 1 area being the downtown core and how it's referenced in the plan, portions of the downtown core are historic Old Town by nature, as referenced within the urban design and architectural guidelines. And so we've tried to really thread consistency between all our policy and regulatory documents as to how we make reference to this area of the community. And that, I guess that's all I can really add to this item as a response. So thank you.
No, and I appreciate that. I just, again, I look at this and I just don't agree, and that's okay. I'm just one citizen in this city. But I mean, you look at what we're calling Old Town, there's a lot of things that are not at all old. New development is going in there all the time. It is our downtown. So I get that that's the choice that's been made. I'm just voicing to me, I'm not understanding the sense of it, but again, one voice. Thank you.
And are you going to respond to that?
Commissioner Scarborough and Commissioner Ertel, I can and I will. Just to the last point that I made and perhaps missed in my last remarks is that the city's tourism office went through a robust marketing and branding effort based on past members of council's direction at the time to call Old Town, and so there's a big branding effort behind doing that. I realize and appreciate your commentary on it, but certainly we would rely on council's direction to modify such. We can certainly record and capture your comment as one from Planning Commission and forward it for council to consider, but I don't have anything else to add at this time. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Serena, I guess he wanted to come next.
Yeah, I know we've talked about infill incentive, and I know council took action on that. I know there's been obviously a lot of steps to get to where this is ultimately going to end up. And my only thought is, could you confirm what happened with infill incentive so people that might not have the bandwidth to watch every meeting that spans this process and happens to tune in tonight as their only experience knows where we are, because that feels like that's one of the largest comments or questions I get about this is regarding infill incentives. So I know the comments are in here, the amendments. Can you just cover that, though?
I'm happy to. Commissioner Serena, Chair Higgs on the phone, and members of the commission. With respect to the Old Town updates process, as I mentioned, we kind of covered 4 specific areas based on council direction at the start of this process in 2021. That was to look at the Old Town Character Area Plan, affected sections of the zoning ordinance as a second item, the third item being the infill incentive district and plan, and finally the fourth being the Old Town urban design and architectural guidelines. As a result of all that outreach that we kind of, for lack of a better word and processes, we try to flood the public and trying to having them understand how each one of these plans and policies and ordinances relate to one another. Subsequent to our outreach process, decided to kind of take a phased approach so that there could be really a focused effort in looking at each one of these steps that we're moving forward. Through our public outreach process, not only did we hear unanimous support for the repeal of the infill incentive district and plan, but we also seemed to get an expressed interest from council on the same. And then subsequently, council took action on such in early September. And so The second step is where we're at this evening, looking at the character area plan from a policy perspective, and what changes we'll be incorporating from a character standpoint. The next step will be really evaluating the implementation items of the zoning ordinance and a subsequent update to specifically the development types map. So this update that you're evaluating this evening does not include an update to the development types map, but rather because there's such a dovetail, if you will, to the ordinance, we thought that that was more appropriate to bring together so that there could be focused discussion on that at that time. To wrap up the overall process in terms of what we're going to be doing, once we receive all the updates through each one of those steps that I just described, we'll be bringing forward Old Town Urban Design and Architectural Guideline update that will be processed through the Development Review Board. And so that kind of illustrates the full opportunities for the public to get involved. We have a website, just so I can selfishly solicit such. You can go to scottsdaleaz.gov, keyword Old Town Updates, and we have each one of these steps and processes available online for folks to engage and have input on the public process. So although this is one step in the process, there are still many steps in which folks can have input.
Yeah. Awesome. Thank you.
Commissioner Gonzalez.
I think Commissioner Kaminsky also wanted to see a map brought up.
It was just in referral to what we were discussing earlier.
Oh, okay. You know, I think this has probably been the biggest outreach I've ever seen the city do in this short period of time since you got direction from the city council. I commend you on your outreach. Everything, the program has been fantastic. I've gone to a couple of your meetings and everything. I think the open houses have been well attended. I feel that the public has a lot of good knowledge about it. There is confusion all the time. I agree that it's kind of confusion, old town overlays, and the different types of mechanisms that have brought you to this point. But I think you've completely vetted most of the issues and questions that most of the public has had about this. And although there's no real end in sight, at least we're making steps into making these corrections and making these adaptions to creating a more comprehensive outlook about the general area and general plan. And that's why I'm really pretty happy about the program, because I feel there's been a lot of participation so far. And so I commend you and your staff in what you're doing. I think you're doing a good job, and I think you're doing it the right way. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. If I may, Commissioner Ertel, if there's no additional comments on the vision or value section, we can move on to additional presentation material that we have for the commission this evening.
Okay, I think Commissioner Kaminsky said she did not have anything. Chair Higgs, do you have anything? Chair Higgs?
No, I do not. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Ertel.
Go ahead.
So the next topic that we'll move on to is the provision of mixed-use development. Our general plan is a citywide policy document, as you know, which defines mixed use as follows. It focuses on human-scale development and are located in areas with strong access to multiple modes of transportation and major regional services. These areas accommodate higher density housing combined with complementary office and retail uses. And mixed-use neighborhoods are most suitable near and within growth and activity areas. Mixed-use neighborhoods may be non-residential in the greater Air Park character area. This map on the right really is intended to illustrate that fuchsia or purple color really designates all of Old Town as mixed-use neighborhoods. And so by way of definition within the general plan, there is no defined ratio as to what comprises of mixed use. Moving on to a character area level, the current definition of mixed use within the Old Town Scottsdale character area plan is that it's the practice of allowing more than one type of land use in a building or set of buildings. And mixed use may be developed in a variety of ways, either horizontally in multiple buildings or vertically in the same building, or through a combination of the two. At a regulatory standpoint, the zoning ordinance defines mixed use as a development that contains non-residential and residential uses that are arranged either horizontally and or vertically within a development's area. So on this topic of the provision of mixed use, we looked at how mixed use is evaluated in other communities, and generally speaking, through all the communities that are shown on the right side of the screen, it's evaluated through a combination of 2 or more differing land uses within a parcel or structure. City of Phoenix was really an outlier in that in some areas of its most urban core, 50% of the ground floor is a use that is different from the floor above it. And so all these communities kind of regulate mix of uses on a case-by-case basis, predominantly through development agreements, which prescribe specific development standards, may limit residential to upper floors, provides a percentage of ground floor dedicated to non-residential use, so on. So in this application, it provides maximum flexibility for the hearing body to consider the context of each proposal and evaluate it on the merits of what is being brought forward as opposed to prescribing a fixed ratio of uses. And so what we heard from the public when we talked about the mixed use in Old Town, we did hear that there was some support to utilize percentages to regulate ground floor uses and establish mixed-use development, specifically in that area between Goldwater and Drinkwater Couplet, south of the canal. We also heard that it was important to maintain the character of the downtown core and historic Old Town, and a desire to offer continued support for development flexibility. And so because all of those policy, two of the 3 documents that I mentioned, one being regulatory, but all 3 not prescribing a ratio of mix of uses, we are adding a definition to the character area plan of horizontal mixed use that's been included in your agenda packet and is also available on screen. And we've amended a portion of the vertical mixed use definition that is currently within the plan, striking industrial because it's not a predominant use within the Old Town area. We just reviewed the topic of mixed-use development. Commissioner Ortel, members of the commission, I'm happy to answer any questions on this item before we move on.
Any questions or comments? None?
Maybe it's, excuse me, maybe it's in the mixed use piece of this. Maybe it's in a different piece, but parking and, underground versus, building up and parking, is this the place where we covering this, and is that incorporated in any way?
I'm certainly happy to oblige, Commissioner Serena, if you want to just ask the question. I have my regulatory counterpart, Brad Carr, here this evening, who might be able to answer questions if I cannot.
Yeah, I think the one thing that I've seen is at times I've seen projects that come and maybe they were approved, and I think one's kind of on Camelback, and they were approved, and when certain type zonings changed, they came back through, and really, the only difference was they just brought the parking above ground and not a whole lot changed on square footage, and that was kind of it. And my thought was, is there a way after a certain number of above ground floors to start some sort of trade-off in the character area plan? I don't know if that would be the right document for that, but to start having a trade-off for every floor above you go down, because it seems like some people are taking advantage of just the vertical part to save, I would imagine, quite a bit per stall. And I don't think that was probably the intent.
Chair Higgs, Commissioner Serena, members of the commission, there's really nothing in the zoning ordinance or regulatory documents that would dictate, make it a requirement to build underground versus above ground parking structures. There are a few incentives within the zoning ordinance that would allow you a small amount of additional floor area ratio if you do build in a parking structure above grade, and even more so if you do below grade. But most times we find that decision is usually made by market constraints, the size of the property and the land value, as to whether or not a property owner would decide to do above grade or below grade parking. And fortunately for us, most larger projects that we've seen in the downtown, Old Town area have chosen to go underground. Most times when we see any kind of above ground parking structures or parking, it's usually for a smaller scale project that doesn't really necessarily have that space to build below grade. But there's nothing, again, regulatory wise that would say you have to build below grade or above grade. Within the character area plan, I do know that there are some design considerations that speak to parking being located in parking structures versus on the surface level. And whether or not that be above grade or below grade, it doesn't really, again, say that one is preferred. I think it just says those structures should be, or parking should be in structures, which is a better and more efficient way of having parking. And I know that's followed again by our design guidelines for the Old Town area, which note that as well, that if you have parking in a structure, it's better than having it on the surface level.
Yeah. So that would be my only, and I don't, recommendation for the notes, and if there's, support for it, and I'd love to hear comment, but I agree that, I mean, there's plenty of projects that have gone underground, and they did that, and it works out really well. But I think there's certainly been some examples of ones that have taken advantage of the height and, just come back through the process and moved all their spots above ground with no other real added benefit except for paying the bonus or paying the fee for it. So I would at least like that to be maybe looked at or brought up, and if council thinks it makes sense, if it hasn't been discussed, that's something that I know has been a sticking point on a couple of projects. Not all, I think all, to your point, or a majority of them are doing a pretty good job of incorporating underground, but maybe require that to be a little bit, have a little more teeth to it, or maybe a little better trade-off for the city, because I know that the difference between underground versus above ground is significant. And last time this was an issue, I think the trade-off was quite the ROI to pay for it for the developer.
If I may, Commissioner Serena, members of the commission, I think your item, certainly we can capture the comment, but I believe it would be most appropriate in line with the future zoning ordinance changes that we'll be bringing forward relative to bonus provisions and how that gets accounted for.
Perfect. Thank you.
Sir.
I guess probably the thing, if I could go in retrospect and look at some of these projects that have been developed within the Old Town and into the areas that we're talking about, one of the things that I've, it's always been a sticking point with me is that previous developments through previous other planning and zoning projects have actually, allowed bonuses being paid out for projects that they would do in lieu of the square footage parameters for parking. They would take a monetary value and assess it to, and allow them to go up to a second or third phase rather than the first phase as far as the parking. And I guess that would be the one thing that I'd like to address, but I don't know if it's practical to be at this point, at this juncture, what we're doing now, to be able to go in there and look at these bonuses that some people have been able to purchase in the past to utilize parking that they normally would not be able to produce within their project.
Thank you, Commissioner Gonzalez, members of the commission. Again, I think we can bring this item back before the commission in their consideration of future text amendment to the zoning ordinance, which is part of a planned part of this process.
Commissioner Kaminsky, Chair Higgs.
Yeah, I don't have anything, thank you.
Okay.
Sorry, it takes me a second to find my mouse and get it woken up again.
All right, thank you. One of the bullet points dealt with, as I recall, first floor commercial use. And you had mentioned that there was support for that. I was at one of the open houses, and it seemed to go both ways. I don't know, not saying it was 50-50 by any means. I have no idea. Do you have any idea what the support was for that? And
Thank you, Commissioner Ertel, members of the commission. In response to outreach received, as you recall, and you recall it correctly, it was pretty much split down the middle. When we did have discussion with City Council on the item, it was a similar split, I would say. I can't recall exactly, but I'll say that there was not an express consensus to really do one or the other. And part of why we've brought forward the limited scope in what we're bringing forward for an amendment related to this item is because, again, the current regulations within the zoning ordinance don't prescribe anything beyond what's in the downtown core as being a fixed ratio of mixture of uses, nor is it referenced in either policy document of either the general plan or current Old Town Character Area Plan.
So, and I've forgotten, what does this policy statement then say about that? I forget what the bullet point said. I just picked up on the first floor commercial usage.
This was just a representation of some examples in which other communities adopt stipulations or conditions.
Okay, yes.
To prescribe such a mix of uses.
Okay, thank you. All right, next section.
All right, moving on to the provision of open space. The Old Town Scottsdale Character Area Plan references open space and connectivity within the Character and Design chapter. Within General Plan 2035, open space element, it expresses the city's commitment to providing, maintaining, and enhancing and expanding both active and passive open space areas throughout the community to serve the local citizens and remain a highly desirable tourist destination. There are a series of policies within the general plan that speak to that specifically, in ways in which we leverage such improvements within our Old Town area. What we heard from the community is support for the continued use of our public space and connectivity master plan or exhibit to guide development in creating new or expanding existing public realm open space areas and pedestrian connections. There was notation that the map could be made clearer with an emphasis on connections within and between open space areas, and so what's proposed is a map to reflect open space and connectivity throughout all of Old Town. It emphasizes those connections between open spaces that are most predominant in Old Town, and it includes entitled and future desired open spaces. And so commonly we'll get remarks of, well, where's the open space? Well, there's no open space requirement in Old Town, but as per to scale, what's shown is where we have entitled and developed open spaces, and it provides some talking point for staff and the development community when projects are brought forward as to how we can further open space opportunities throughout our Old Town area. Additionally, we have a pedestrian connectivity map within the Old Town plan, and what's proposed is we've updated the pedestrian definitions within the plan to more clearly convey the differences between our hierarchy of pedestrian spaces, which are pedestrian place, pedestrian supportive, and pedestrian compatible, which I'll touch on the next slide. We've also aligned the map to match those definitions, and we've also made reference to areas in which our Old Town major intersections within the zoning ordinance are called to have specific open space areas through the creation of a new policy, M4.4, that was in your agenda packet. We've also renamed the pedestrian place identified as previously shown as Museum Square to La Loma Plaza based on public input received. And so to give some illustration of that hierarchy of pedestrian spaces that really give a way in which the community can anticipate areas in which we have the greatest level of pedestrian activity to areas that are simply compatible to pedestrians but don't provide enhanced amenities. We have pedestrian place shown on the furthest left side of the screen, with an example being the Marshall Way Bridge and South Bridge area that have wide sidewalks, outdoor dining, traffic moving at low speeds, and frequent crossing opportunities. Kind of that middle ground of pedestrian supportive areas being an example, Indian School Road, which includes wide sidewalks separated from traffic and shade trees, and bicycles are accommodated in an on-street bike lane. And then there are pedestrian compatible areas such as Drinkwater Boulevard, which accommodates the pedestrian with landscape separated sidewalks and include the provisions for trees and shade. As was included in your agenda packet, there are expanded definitions. This is just simply intended to be shorthand available for you to make example of with some quick illustrations, but that's the intention of those spaces within the plan. So at this point in time, commissioners, we've just reviewed open space, the public space and connectivity map, and pedestrian connectivity map and associated definitions. I'm happy to answer any questions at this time. Thank you.
Any questions, any comments? None, I believe.
All right.
Commissioner, or Chair Higgs?
Nope, I'm good, thanks.
Okay, thanks.
Finally, we're going to touch on the provision of quality development and how that's made up in Scottsdale, and specifically Old Town. And so as we kind of started the conversation this evening of what makes up policy and subsequent ordinance to implement these wonderful goals and policies of our character area plans, it all starts with our general plan, which is a citywide expression of goals and policies at a citywide level. At a more refined level, we have our Old Town Scottsdale Character Area Plan, which is a topic of this evening's discussion. And through the implementation of both our urban design and architectural guidelines and implementation of our zoning ordinance, can we realize those goals and aspirations. And so there are specific design objectives expressed within the urban design and architectural guidelines that's available on screen for you to review, but I'll name just a few. It's to protect the unique character of our downtown core, strengthen pedestrian areas, maintain an interconnected downtown, create a distinct landscape area, and encourage a vibrant, lively, and attractive downtown destination. What we heard from the public was support for Old Town design objectives. We heard that quality development is and remains to be a priority within the surrounding context, focusing on building setbacks, open space, streetscapes, and street space continuity. So what's proposed within this first phase one element of our Old Town Character Area Plan amendment is the introduction of two land use policies, policy LU 3.5, which asks to locate higher scale development, which is type 2, type 2.5, and type 3 outside of the downtown core. And policy 3.6, which supports a sensitive edge buffer where development transitions in scale, height, and intensity away from the downtown core, which are those areas shown in green, or the type 1 area that was previously mentioned by Commissioner Scarborough. Additionally, regarding the provision of quality development at a character and design chapter, within the character and design chapter, we have the introduction of a new policy, policy CD 1.2, which promotes transitions and blending of character between developments, including building location, open space areas, building height, massing, and orientation. And we've revised policy CD 4.2 to bring clarity as to where one might expect covered walkways to exist. So it's that we retain and expand the tradition of covered walkways throughout the downtown core or type 1 areas and encourage the use of covered walkways, cantilevered awnings, and tree canopies in all other districts available on screen. Commissioner Ertel, members of the Planning Commission, we just reviewed quality development policies LU 3.5 and 3.6, as well as new policy of CD 1.2 to address transitions between developments, and policy 4.2 to clarify where covered walkways are encouraged. I'm happy to answer any questions on this topic, and we'll take a pause now.
Commissioner Kaminsky.
Could you put that map up again? I wanted to go back to Commissioner Scarborough's question. I'm wondering if the references were just made to type 1, type 2, type 3 as defined in the document rather than referencing downtown core. Because it was an interesting observation, and I think it's the nuance of what people perceive as downtown core versus Old Town. And if the marketing is related to Old Town, then is the word downtown core as important as just calling it type 1 to remove that confusion in the overlap?
Thank you for the question, Commissioner Kaminsky, members of the Planning Commission. The reference of downtown core is a term that's referenced within our zoning ordinance. And so that tie back and connection is intended to reflect as such. And I'll look to my colleague here, Mr. Carr, to remark any differently if he has anything else to add.
But we are proposing to amend that
Correct.
subsequent to this, right?
Correct.
Okay.
Yes, Chair Higgs, Commissioner Ertel, and Commissioner Kaminsky, you're right. We are proposing to amend that text, and certainly we could look at also amending the companion text in the zoning ordinance to match that. So I think Adam and I and our colleagues will take a look at that. That's maybe an area, like you said, we can revise something in order to make it less confusing.
Yeah,
from that standpoint.
I appreciate that too. And Commissioner Kaminsky, thank you for bringing it up, because to me, we have exhibits here calling the downtown development types, but it's really the Old Town development types. So I think the way to make this clearer for everybody with keeping with what's been marketed is literally just removing the term downtown from everything, because it doesn't make sense to call them downtown development types when there is no area that is defined as downtown. was not even in the glossary downtown. So I love where you're going with that. If it was just all referenced with Old Town and just make that adjustment.
When you brought it up, I didn't really notice it till you mentioned it, but it's the character area plan for the Old Town. And if we're talking about the character, we should focus on what the document's about.
Correct.
Thank
I
you.
agree with you. Thank you.
And if I could, real quickly, just a little bit of follow-up on that. Adam mentioned the next phase of this, which will be a more comprehensive review of the zoning ordinance. Within that change, we are changing out all the references to downtown to Old Town. So that should help that tie in a lot better by bringing that up to current status.
I think we just figured out a really good solution to make it less confusing. Thank you.
Yeah, if you could consider that as you're going through the next step, consider that. I mean, not to say you guys, but you guys who have been very much involved in this for years. I mean, Mr. Yarn has lived this. He's not going to know what to do with his life after it's all over. But I mean, you begin to look at it a certain way. But to the independent viewer, us over here, it's confusing. So, maybe you could make some accommodation for that.
Thank you, Commissioner Kaminsky, Commissioner Scarborough, and Commissioner Ertel.
Anything else? All right.
So the additional items that are being brought forward with this first Phase 1 update to the character area plan is that we've brought the plan up to date to align with other policy documents, as I previously mentioned, most notably the General Plan 2035. We've also updated the Old Town Bikeways map to align with Old Town Scottsdale Bicycle Master Plan. Based on public input received, we've moved map 8, which is currently in the plan referencing public parking, and it will be a reference document to the plan. And the reason for such is so that we don't have to bring it back for amendment as we count and enumerate parking over time. We've updated related plans, ordinances, and documents that relate to the plan in that section of the plan, as well as evaluated the operational aspects of the implementation chapter and updated that as well. In terms of our next steps to the Old Town update process, as I kind of led with, we're looking at somewhat of a limited scope in this first Phase 1 element. The next phase will cover development types, designations, their locations and transitions, maintaining, adding, restricting, reducing, or removing zoning ordinance base and bonus development standards, the consideration of development flexibility in the plan, zoning ordinance and guidelines, and ensuring that bonus provisions within the zoning ordinance, if maintained, provide greater and better defined public benefits, and re-examine the bonus payment calculations. Now, these updates, most notably, are anticipated to be prospective in nature in order to preserve any existing property rights. But again, that subsequent update will focus on the Old Town Scottsdale Character Area Plan, elements of the Old Town Scottsdale Character Area Plan, and affected sections of the zoning ordinance. At this point in time, unless there's any additional questions from the Commission, Commissioner Ertel, members of the Commission, we're asking for a recommendation this evening to City Council to adopt Resolution number 12745, adopting a minor amendment to the City of Scottsdale General Plan 2035 by amending and updating the Old Town Scottsdale Character Area Plan.
Would anyone like to make a motion to that effect? Commissioner Kaminsky.
Yes, I'd like to move that we recommend approval for 5 GP 2021, the Old Town Character Area Plan Amendment Phase 1, to the City Council for approval of case 5 GP 2021 per the staff recommended minor amendment to the City of Scottsdale General Plan 2035 by amending and updating the Old Town Scottsdale Character Area Plan, and the proposed amendment is consistent and conforms with the adopted general plan.
Do we have a second?
Second.
Do we have any discussion? Could you call the roll, Jason?
Real quick.
Oh,
Mr. Ron, I just want to express our appreciation. We know how hard you work and everything you put into each one of these tasks that you take on, and we just want to say thank you very much. It's an amazing job you do, so we appreciate you.
Thank you, Commissioner Scarborough, members of the Commission. And if I might, just before the vote is called, just offer a selfish plug again for additional public outreach. In the process, if folks want to get online and get involved, there's still opportunity to do so. Go to scottsdaleaz.gov, keyword Old Town Updates. Both my information and Brad Carr's information is available on screen. We're accessible to answer any questions and provide illustration as to what the public process looks like. So thank you very much.
Great, thank you. May we have the roll call, please?
Chair Higgs,
Yes.
Commissioner Gonzalez,
Yes.
Commissioner Kaminsky,
Yes.
Commissioner Ortell,
Yes.
Commissioner Scarborough,
Yes.
Commissioner Serena.
Yes.
Motion passes 6-0. Thank you.
Thank you.
Very good. Do we have any final comments or questions from the commissioners or Mr. Curtis? Seeing none, can I have a motion for adjournment?
So moved.
All in favor?
Aye.
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 And we're done.